like this.
The people in the square, what connection do they have? Were they also conscripts as well?
Yes, they were conscripts, but the ones on the square, they stayed in the mainland.
I understand.
Yes, but they weren't fighting on the islands, yes.
But do you have a standing army?
We do have a standing army. It's not big because this is a country that is not involved in wars, luckily. And then on the other hand, let's keep in mind that our last dictatorial government, the army and the militaries were involved over there. So from that moment on, no democratic government wanted to give that much power to the army. But yes, we do have a standing army.
During World War II, you remained neutral, right?
Yes, we did. We did. Guys, take a look to the right. Over there you will find the sculpture done by the Colombian artist Fernando Botero. It's known as the male torso. Basically, that's what it shows here. We don't need the imagination required to see the chocolate box at the stadium or the couple dancing tango at the bridge, right? Show the torso of a man, and that's how we call it. So you can see it has no head. That's why we say that it's the monument to the Argentinian men. Only the Argentinian, huh? Only the Argentinian, and with the exception of Hugo. We better treat him nicely, otherwise we'll have to walk what is left of the tour. And if you pay attention to the left, in just a moment, guys, you will be able to find a colorful building with a staircase in the front, which is called Palais de Glace. Palais de Glace is a French word that in English means something as the Ice Palace. It's called like that because originally that building was an ice skating rink for the high society. Throughout its history, it has been used for several things, and at some point it became a dance salon. And it's right over there where the tango, our most traditional dance, was danced for the first time in high society. As you know by now, the tango was born in the south of the city at the end of the 19th century, but it was born as a marginal dance because at the beginning it was danced in brothels and cabarets, and because of the way in which the tango was and is still danced, right? Too much of a sensual and provocative dance so as to be accepted by the conservative high society that we had at that time in Buenos Aires. But at the beginning of the 20th century, the tango became famous in France, just when we were obsessed about looking like them. So when we saw that the tango was being danced in France, all of a sudden the high society here thought that it was a marvelous dance, and they began to dance it in the best salons. That happened around the year 1914. To the right, in a moment, you will find a building with many columns. That is the law school that belongs to the University of Buenos Aires. Once again, this is a public university, and it's an example of the free and public education here in Argentina.
Has anybody lived on the Falklands ever? Do people live there?
Yes. There is a British community right over there living now. There are not thousands, but there is a group of people living over there. And actually, a couple of years ago, it was a referendum asking people whether they wanted to be British or they wanted to be Argentinian. Of course, 99.99999% said that they wanted to be British, and the one that said Argentinian might have been drunk and was drunk or something, right? Because they're culturally attached to England. Since the 1830s, it's an English community living over there. Take a look to the right, guys. What we see there is a sculpture designed to be the first mobile sculpture of Buenos Aires City. Represents a flower designed in a way that it can open and close according to the moment of the day. It opens daily in the morning and it closes in the evenings. We have it here in the city since the year 2001 and was designed by an Argentinian sculptor called Eduardo Catalano. At nights when it's closed, it also has green and red lights around.
Is it mechanical?
It is, yes, it is mechanical, but it's photosensitive, and it's
yes.
It is photosensitive, and it's also sensitive to the wind. If the wind gets a certain speed, then the flower closes to protect its mechanism. Look at all the Jacaranda trees, these purple trees down this avenue. They bloom now in November, so it's 2 or 3 weeks that they have the flowers and then they lose the flowers, and it's just a regular green tree that doesn't have much of special. But this time of the year, it's beautiful in the city with all these trees. Very good, guys. So that's a TV station.
TV station.
Yeah. This neighborhood where we are now, guys, is the neighborhood of Palermo. Buenos Aires City is divided into 48 different neighborhoods, and among all of them, Palermo is the biggest one, and that's why it's been subdivided into different areas. The area that we will see today is what we know as Palermo Chico or Palermo Embassy. It's called like this because of the large amount of embassies that we have in this part of town. And other areas of Palermo include Palermo Parks and Lakes, Palermo Soho, Palermo Hollywood, Old Palermo, New Palermo, I mean whatever you can think of depending on the different characteristics. Right over here we have a large amount of embassies, so that's why we called it Palermo Embassy. The buildings where today we have the embassies were in most of the cases the private residences of these wealthy families that came here escaping the yellow fever and cholera epidemics that affected the south part of the city at the end of the 19th century. What happened is that after the worldwide economical crisis that followed the collapse of the Wall Street market in the year 1929, many of these families saw themselves in the need of selling some of their properties because they couldn't afford maintaining them anymore. And in time, these properties were bought by foreign governments or the local one, and that's when they were turned into government buildings, embassies, museums, etc.
I see a lot of wrought iron balconies.
Yes.
How do you attribute that to influence of French? French mostly, yes.
So this area, as I mentioned, it's known as Palermo Chico. This is neatly a residential area. You will notice two big differences with the area that surrounds it. First, that we don't have here apartment buildings. Most of what we see are houses, few-story houses, but houses. And then take a look at the layout of this area. The city of Buenos Aires, as a colonial town, was laid as a grid, with streets that cut in angles of 90 degrees as if it were a chessboard, which is the way in which the Spaniards used to lay their colonies, at least in flat areas. Remember also that at the end of the 19th century we decided that we didn't want to look like an old colonial town anymore, and that's when the architecture of the city started to change, and we also made an effort to change its layout. This area, where we are now, was designed by a French landscaper called Charles Taillis. He designed not only this area, but some of the most important parks and gardens that we have in Buenos Aires and in the main cities of Argentina. So we see that the streets have curves differently, completely different to what we see in the rest of the city. And also pay attention that all the houses have, between the gates and the house itself, a small area where it could be a garden. That is what this is. That is why this area is known also as the park neighborhood, right? Not all of them have a garden, but at least they have a space to do so. And as I mentioned before, it's in this area of Buenos Aires that we will be able to find quite a big deal of embassies. I will show you just a few as an example and try to think of these buildings that we'll see now as the private residences that once were, and will give us an idea of the wealth that we had in our country at that time. Turkish embassy to the right now. In a moment to the left, with the black gates, you will be able to see the Saudi Arabian embassy, this building to the left now. If you take a look to the right, you will find now the Polish embassy. To the left, you will be able to find the Swedish embassy, now over there. And also to the left, as we get to the corner, you'll be able to find the embassy of Malta, there to the left.
Where's the American embassy?
The American embassy is also in Palermo, but a little bit farther north. It's not in the area of the embassies, but it's also in the neighborhood of Palermo. If you take a look to the left, now guys, you will be able to find there a monument that honors the memory of our liberator. Our liberator was a man called José de San Martín that not only liberated Argentina but also helped to the liberation of Chile and Peru. This is one of the many monuments that we have of this man in Buenos Aires, but it's the only one that will show San Martín as a civilian and as a grandfather. In all the other monuments that we have of him, we see him as a military, normally riding his horse, coming, going to some battle, or whatever it is that he's doing. Over there, instead, we see him seated in his chair and surrounded by his granddaughters. It's the only monument of this kind that we have in Buenos Aires. And if you take a look to the right, that white building with a black roof that you see there is the Martini Institute. It's a place where are done historical researches regarding San Martin, his liberating campaign and his life. And the building itself, it's a replica of the place where San Martin died. San Martin died in the year 1850, not here in Argentina, but in Boulogne-sur-Mer in France. Ahead of us and to the left you will find another beautiful building. As we turn left you will see it to your right. That was also a former private residence. Over there lived a couple with their 2 children and their 25 servants, because it looks like they needed assistance even to brush their teeth. And the funny thing is that this family brought many of the materials required to build his house directly from France. So big was the obsession of these families of looking like Europe that it wasn't enough for them with just copying the architecture, hiring the architects that used to work in Europe at the time, but whenever they could bring the materials to build their houses, they did it as well, right? Today over there is a museum. It's the National Museum of Decorative Art.
Are closed today, most of them?
Many of them, yes. This one is closed and the Fine Arts Museum is closed as well. The one that is open is the Latin American Art Museum. That is open today but closes tomorrow, the Malva.
Did you see it? Huh? Okay. No, but it's got one of those, like Rockefeller Center, the lower floor.
Now guys, if you take a look to the right as we get to the next corner, you will be able to find there one of the monuments in Buenos Aires that honor the memory of Evita. As perhaps many of you already know, Evita was the first lady of Argentina between the years 1946 and 1952. And as the first lady of our country, she gave an enormous help to the needy ones, right? And that's what made her so popular, at moments even more than her husband, Juan Domingo Peron, that was the president of Argentina at that time. Evita died very young, when she was only 33 years old, out of a cervical cancer. However, it's amazing to think how much she has been able to achieve in such a short life. It was a woman around whose figure the society was clearly divided. There were those who loved her and those who disliked her with the same strength than those who loved her. But no matter on what side of the line we're staying, the true thing is that it was a woman who left her mark in the society, for better or worse. That will depend on each and everyone's point of view, right? But her mark is certainly there. We can say that there was a before and after Evita and Peron in our society. Evita's remains are located at the Recoleta cemetery that we will be visiting in just a little bit.
There was something that happened right after the revolution that had something to do with trying to bring back Evita's memory or something, a party or something, a political party. I know she was dead in 1952.
Yes.
There was a kind of a Peronist movement that came after the revolution, something.
Yes, I mean, Evita died in 1952, but her husband remained in power. He was deposed in the year 1955 and he had to exile. And in the year 1970 or 73, Peron returned to Argentina for his last term as the president.
So it was before the revolution. I mean, before
Yes,
the dictatorship.
before the dictatorship.
Yeah.
Peron died in power. After Evita died, Peron remarried with a lady called Isabel Peron. When he returned to be the president of Argentina in his last term, his new wife, Isabel Peron, was the vice president,
Oh,
right?
that's what it was.
Peron died in power in 1974, so Isabel Peron, which is a woman that Peron met as a pole dancer in a cabaret, became the president of Argentina. Imagine
geez.
how much he could understand about politics, right? And she was the one deposed by the military coup in 1976.
Well, she's too old for it.
She's still alive.
Yeah, but she's too old for it.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe that's what you remember about
That's
Peron.
what I remember.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So she was.
Very good, guys. We are now in the neighborhood of Recoleta. In front of us, and in a moment to the left, we see once again the Palais de Glace, this place where the tango was danced for the first time in high society. Over here to the right, we have the main square of Recoleta. It is the Alvear Square, where every weekend works one of the most traditional craft markets of Buenos Aires. Because of the weather and because perhaps it's a little bit early, but mostly because of the weather, we don't see much going on, right? But overall, we are not morning people here, guys. So whenever you want to go to a market or whatever, do it in the afternoon, because in the morning you will only, most of the times, end up helping the guys to set up everything. So there is a combination between the weather and the time of the day. Take a look to the left, guys. Look at these trees. They are called rubber.
Ho capito molte cose, dopo tanti e tanti mesi ora so cosa sono